Welcome to the Senate Minute, a podcast dedicated to keeping the public informed about the Indiana General Assembly and engaged in the legislative process. This week, the Indiana General Assembly convened for the first time for the ceremonial start of the 2017 legislative session. Organization Day is an opportunity for legislators to meet with other lawmakers and staff to discuss legislative topics. The 2017 legislative session will reconvene January 3rd and, by law, must end no later than April 29th. During the upcoming session, lawmakers will be crafting the state's next two-year budget, which will fund all state government services, including education, infrastructure, and public safety. 9 new senators from across Indiana will be participating in their very first legislative session. John Ruckelshaus, one of the new senators, was elected to represent District 30, which includes portions of Marion and Hamilton counties.
Okay, so welcome to the State House, Senator. Why did you decide to run for the state Senate?
You know, I really felt called to come back to public service. It's been 24 years since I was a state representative, and a lot of things have changed in that period. And when I first served in the Indiana General Assembly, I had 3 very young children, and I really needed to be at home. So when I decided to leave the General Assembly, it was primarily for family. And you just get one shot at being a dad, and I just thought that was the most important thing to do at that time in my life. And my children had some medical issues, so I'm really glad I did that. So now they're grown, and they're on their own. You give them roots and you give them wings. And right now, I just really feel called to come back to public service at this time when there's seemingly so much cross currents and people, nobody's talking to each other, nobody's listening to each other. And that's really what I specialize in. And that's really what I like to do, is to help bring people together. And I think at this time in our nation's history and politics and government, that's what I'm here for.
Great. And what are some of your goals for the first session?
Well, big goals for the first session really are metamorphosing out of what we saw in the campaign and what I've done in my past is a couple things. One is education. I used to work for Governor Daniels, Mitch Daniels, in his administration. I was a deputy commissioner, Department of Workforce Development. And we were tasked in that administration, in that agency, with not only helping the unemployed in the state of Indiana find new jobs, but we also worked very closely with the state's K through 12 education system and higher education system. So I traveled to all 92 counties, and I've been to multiple places of businesses, and I really know the state well now to the extent of where the jobs are, who's creating the jobs, who are we, what is the Indiana DNA, so to speak. And there's a real skills gap between the jobs that are there now, the jobs that are coming, and the children that are moving their way through the system. So there's a real need for that. So workforce development, I know Governor-elect Eric Holcomb is thankfully on the same page. He wants to focus on that, the human capital aspect of it. The second thing that I want to focus on is healthcare. I really have a passion for healthcare given my family's medical history. We've been avid consumers of the healthcare system. And we're really in an interesting time in healthcare, and we're sort of in an intersection, if you will, with the whole Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whichever term you want to use, and then we'll see what the new administration wants to do with healthcare. So I think the states are going to have a critical role in that.
And you mentioned that you had some history, so tell me about that history in public service and local government.
So I started out actually being elected to the Washington Township Advisory Board in Marion County. And advisory boards principally are tasked with then the fire department administration and the care of cemeteries. So that was probably my first foray. My first experience was caring for the cemeteries. It was my breeding ground, I guess you would say. From there, I ran for the Indiana House of Representatives and was elected in 1990. And I was a state rep and from 1990 to 1992. Serving basically the whole north side of Indianapolis. We had multi-member districts back in the day. Paul Manweiler and John Keeler were the other state reps and myself. And then I lost my seat in redistricting, the redistricting process. But again, as I mentioned before, best thing that could have happened to me, just go home and be a dad. And then we had a lumber business. And then once we sold our interests in the lumber business, Governor Daniels came calling and said he wanted me to come back and return to public service. So we did, and that's when I mentioned the Department of Workforce Development, which was a real education to learn about not only I had the legislative experience in state government, but now I had the true experience in state government of how it works in the different agencies, in the governor's office, the executive branch.
Okay. And lastly, on a lighter note, what do you like to do outside of the State House?
Well, I'm an avid Chicago Cubs fan, and I know there's a lot of company these days that people have come out, so I really enjoy actually a little time up at Wrigley Field when I can. I like to read. I would like to say that I like to play golf, but the woods like me more because that's where the ball ends up, so I don't play as much golf as I'd like to. But actually spending time with my children as they've gone about their careers and around the country.
Thank you, listeners, for joining the Senate Minute. You can learn more about the new senators by visiting their biography pages and subscribe to this podcast at IndianaSenateRepublicans.com.